Grant, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I spoke about how having a platform on the internet and how publishing on the internet are two totally different things legally. When you publish, you are legally liable for what you put up on a platform. The platform itself, like YouTube, like Twitter, like Facebook, legally they are not responsible, although they do, obviously, if it's something that's hate speech, they have to take action. But legally, they are not responsible. And when you're a publisher, you are responsible. So you can decide what goes up. You can decide whether a letter, for example, is published or a letter is not published. Now, this is a very, very important point, because through publishing censorship, a paper can actually push an argument one way or the other, depending on the narrative they want to push, which is why we have a total absence of discussion in the South African media about the horrific amount of farm murders, trucking incidents, things like that. They're just totally overlooked, while the papers major on the miners in South Africa. You know, totally irrelevant little things like this tweet that Ernst Roets put up. And Ernst Roets put in a right of reply to a major mainstream paper in South Africa, and they refused to publish his right of reply. So we're on this channel going to actually tell you what Ernst Roets wrote. And he says, this article was sent to News 24 as a right of reply to Peter du Toit's attack on Afriforum. News 24, however, refused to publish this response, and it was therefore sent to Politics Web. And the article reads, the same group who states that the apartheid system was an evil system, among other things because it regulated people's speech and banned opinions that weren't aligned with the ruling elite's ideas, now wants to do exactly the same in the current order. Nelson Mandela at the time said that people who wanted to take other people's freedoms away did so because they were prisoners of hate. He also took a firm stand for freedom of speech and for the tolerance of unpopular opinions. How ironic that nowadays it is the Nelson Mandela Foundation, or NMF, who want to ban the display of symbols such as the so-called old flag. And don't let them fool you. In the first place, the NMF wants you to believe that the ruling of the Equality Court, who ruled in their favour that the display of the old flag amounts to hate speech, is firstly not a banning thereof, secondly that it would not be enforced by police force. Both statements are untrue. If you want to argue about that ruling, namely that the flag may only be displayed for journalistic or artistic purposes, does that not amount to banning? You should in fact also be arguing that the ANC wasn't truly banned under the previous order. The media was allowed to write about the ANC, and the ANC could be displayed in artistic works, as long as these were aligned with the ideology of the government. This is similar to what the NMF argued outside the court about the artistic works of the flag. Secondly, it is just as misleading to claim that this is not regulation by the state, and after all, by the police. The NMF argues that displaying the old flag will only lead to a fine. But what happens when I say, for example, that I have a moral problem with the regulation of freedom of speech and I refuse to pay the fine? I will then be summoned to appear in court, and if I refuse to heed that summons, the police would eventually come knocking at my door because I had been in contempt of court. If I refused to cooperate with the police, I would eventually be subjected to violence. George Orwell's famous dystopic novel, 1984, written in 1949, speculates about the future under totalitarian governments. Orwell very prominently refers to the term newspeak, which requires the regulation of people's speech to manage their thoughts and align them in this way with the national order. He then writes, the revolution will be complete when the language is perfect. The point that he makes is that a government who wants to micromanage, or a totalitarian state, people's lives must regulate their speech to ensure that people do not express themselves in a manner that clashes with the ruling elite's ideology. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And yet the ruling goes further. The court also found that displaying the old flag in your sitting room or bedroom, for example, also amounts to hate speech. How ridiculous is that? Among other things, because you raise your children in a manner that is not aligned with the ruling elite's ideology. The courts and the ANC are part of the same ruling elite. As if it is the state's responsibility to dictate to me how I should raise my children. Afriforum described itself as a reluctant respondent since the case started. This is because Afriforum itself never displays the flag. The NMF nevertheless added Afriforum as respondent to the case. Afriforum decided not to withdraw, as a civil rights organization campaigns for the principle of freedom of speech, yet simultaneously believes that there should be clarity about the difference between freedom of speech and hate speech. Obviously, the mere displaying of something that people view as offensive cannot amount to hate speech. Evidently, the court differs in this regard. The NMF and its supporters want to convince us that apartheid was the same as Nazism and should consequently be addressed in the same manner as Nazism, with reference to the swastika, of course. This is a denial of elementary history, to put it lightly. Alan Paton, then friend of Nelson Mandela, said that it was a prostitution of language to equate apartheid to Nazism. The Jewish genocide spanned 4 years, during which about 6 million people were murdered. This translates to about 1.5 million deaths per year. Communism was far worse. For every person killed in the name of Nazism, more or less 15 people were murdered in the name of communism. During the so-called Great Leap Forward of the communist hero Mao Zedong, 45 million people were killed in 4 years. This amounts to an average of 11,250,000 people per year. During the 50 years or so of apartheid, the security forces killed about 600 people, according to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and then mostly during political unrest. I'm not denying the atrocities committed by the apartheid government, but simply want to point out that comparing it to the Jewish genocide is preposterous. It doesn't even help to try and debate whether the ruling amounts to double standards. Obviously it does. We acknowledge the pain of the people who suffered under the so-called old flag. However, we do not judge the pain of people who suffered under other symbols, for example, the Union Jack, Anglo-Boer War, or the flags of the ANC and the Communist Party, the atrocities of communism, by the same yardstick. And this is where the problem lies. The ruling elite evidently do not concern itself with the blatant facts that it acts inconsistently. It is neither about a view of principles, neither about consistent action. This court ruling is a continuation of an Afro-nationalist battle against minorities to create a homogeneous South Africa in which diversity is used as nothing more than a marketing gimmick, while, in truth, the state forces people through micromanagement to adapt to the ruling elite's political ideals. It is a battle that is driven by a freedom movement that is unable to take responsibility for any of its failures, and even more importantly, is unwilling to acknowledge that the actions of its support base may just be adding to its chagrins. It is an ideology of entitlement, in which any black person suffering is by definition the result of white oppression or exploitation. By implication, it is an ideology that excuses all the failures in the black communities by blaming these on white people. It is also comfortable, would lazy be more appropriate word, because the advocates of the ideology absolve themselves of any responsibilities of introspection or to start working to solve their own problems. They may, of course, practice nationalism. The problem is, however, when this nationalism is practiced by targeting other groups. The result is that the white minority in particular should not only be blamed, but should also be targeted to feed populist statements. In this regard, the Afrikaner is especially picked on. The old flag, which is nothing more than a political flag, is incorrectly associated with Afrikanership. It is not an Afrikaner cultural flag. Neither do the vast majority of Afrikaners have any special loyalty towards the old flag. The numbers of Afrikaners who sometimes display the flag is insignificant. Because of this association, the ruling elite and their supporters rub their hands with joy when the old flag is targeted. It is not about the flag. It is about people who are associated with the flag. If you don't believe this, take 5 minutes to have a discussion with the ANC member who demands the banning of the old flag. We shouldn't be naive and blindly accept that the issue is about one or other legal technical dispute. It is the execution of a totalitarian, Afro-nationalistic ideological battle that aims to obliterate opposing opinions and to conform us all to the political ideas of the ruling elite. If they think they're going to succeed in this, they don't realize what an uphill battle lies ahead. And if you still don't grasp this point, a major disillusion is in store for you. Beautifully written. Beautifully written. And Ernst really hits the nail on the head there. And, it is that certain communities in South Africa are facing extreme persecution in a whole range of areas, including this one about the old flag. Now, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Please like this video and have a safe day.